My name is Jolie, and this is my video app. So I came out the first time as a gay man when I was about 20 years old, and it was there was a lot of drama going on around my coming out, and it's a little bit of a sad story. It happened, I had come out to my sister already, and she was absolutely wonderful about it, and at the time I was a graphic design student, so I was surrounded by people and a community that loved me and just helped me get through that initial process. But me coming out publicly and also to my mom happened because a friend of mine had gotten kicked out of her home because her family found out that she's lesbian. And she sent me a text and she's like, "Joe, I got kicked out of my house. I don't know what to do right now." So her plan was to try to get up to her girlfriend's place in Connecticut, and she was at Grand Central Station, and the last train to Connecticut had already gone out. So she's saying that she said that she planned to just get on the train and she could just sleep on the train, and I was not okay with that. So I called another friend of mine, told him what was going on, and we went out to Grand Central Station and we picked her up and we just sort of spent the night together and making sure that she was okay. And and that's an experience that a lot of queer youth in New York City have. Half of our homeless youth here openly identify as queer. So it's a huge problem, and I was just glad to keep my friends safe. And it was through that experience that we were helping her find a place that she could go, find a shelter that would take her in and make sure that she was all right, that I was like, if there's a time for me to come out to my mom, this is it, because I was terrified to do that. Excuse me. I was raised in a fairly religious household, and I grew up in a very famous church here. I won't say which because I don't want to give him that much credit. I didn't know in which direction my mom would take the news of me coming out and saying, "Hey, I'm gay." So and my mind automatically goes toward the worst possible scenario. So I was just like, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. So I told her what was going on, and part of the thing that actually gave me the courage to do so was that while my friend was waiting for news about a shelter that she could stay in, my mom welcomed her into our home for a couple of nights. And she was mortified that a family could do that to their kid. And so I came out to my mom, and we went through it for a couple of years. She didn't exactly know how to relate to me after that, but happily things are much better between us now. And through that, I became involved with queer youth of color advocacy at an organization called Fierce, where I learned about the incredible legacy that is being a queer person of color in New York City, and how the Stonewall riots were started by Martha P. Johnson and Miss Major and Sylvia Rivera, and how these spaces that we think of as being gay spaces in New York City exist because queer people of color stood up and claimed those spaces for their own. And I learned about how policy gets made and what the statistics are in terms of keeping queer youth safe, and even just like in terms of even in terms of health statistics, where to this day, like if you are Black or Latino and have sex with other men, like your chance of having HIV is still 1 in 2 in New York. So it's having that kind of information that allows me to be active in the community and try to do the most good as I possibly can. And since then, I joined YPC, which is Youth Pride Chorus, and that's where I rediscovered my love of music and performing. and started to develop my voice as an artist and as a singer. And aging out of that program, I sort of went through a phase where I just didn't know what I was doing anymore. It was right in the middle of the recession and nobody was hiring. So I had tried going back into auditioning for musical theater because I started college for that. I couldn't finish college for that. But I just found myself getting frustrated because at least at the time, we were still going through the issue that there just weren't that many jobs for people of color in entertainment and especially in theater. So I got frustrated with that and just didn't really know what I was going to do. And it was after that the artistic director at the time, his name is Wes Webb, for YPC, he reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to do a concert for Our Lady J, and this was well before she was a writer for Transparent and for Pose, which is incredible. And she was doing a show at Joe's Pub. She needed singers in a hurry, and so he asked me if I would be willing to come in and help her out. And I was like, absolutely, put me on a stage, I'm happy. And it was watching her do what she does on stage. She's a remarkable entertainer and performer, and I was like, this is what I need to be doing, because she was just owning who she is and putting that all out on the stage and allowing that to be a part of her story. And it was a few months after that I was still going through this process that the folks from Broadway Backwards reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to share my story on the stage with them. And it was funny that in having the opportunity to sort of live that dream of being on a Broadway stage surrounded by all of these famous people, that I understood that the best thing that I can possibly do was to be myself and to be the person that creates my story and to take ownership of that. And from there, I learned how to write music and how to produce my own music, and it's been a long journey doing it. And throughout that time, I sort of lost touch with a lot of people because I sort of went through the experience of being a teenager all over again, where you don't know exactly who you want to be and you're trying to figure that out. And I just had to cast away 20 years of what I thought I was supposed to be and who I thought I was supposed to be. And so through that, I joined New York City Gay Men's Chorus because I just needed to find a sense of community again. And through that, I found my confidence as a person again. And it's been a really remarkable journey to sort of be able to take ownership of my experiences and who I get to be. And it was through the chorus that another friend of mine came out as non-binary and introduced me just to the concept of using they, them, and theirs as pronouns. And when I heard that, just like a light switch went off in my mind. I was like, oh my God, that's me. And just from that moment, everything about like just the subtle ways that I felt growing up made so much more sense, where it's like, yes, I'm in this body that was assigned male at birth, but I don't necessarily identify with all of these things that we attach to manhood. And I don't necessarily identify as a woman either, but finding that space somewhere in the middle, it opened up so much for me and so much of my own personal development, and I'm more comfortable in my skin than I've ever been. I've still got a long way to go, but I think about where I am now and where I was when I came out the first time, and I'm so much more at peace with myself, and it's really, really remarkable. And the best thing about coming out as non-binary and owning my queerness is that I think this is what makes people uncomfortable. It's that I'm not obligated to uphold anybody's rules for who I am and who I get to be, and that I am solely responsible for how I engage with the world. And does that mean that I have to practice some patience with people? Absolutely, because being non-binary is very new to a lot of people, even though we've been around for thousands and thousands of years. The great thing about owning the label of queer is that it frees me from feeling like I have to fit into anybody's mold. And it's not just the mold that comes from heteronormativity, it's the mold that can come from the LGBT community itself, where gay men have rules about how we're supposed to behave or how we're supposed to fit into the mold of being butch or being femme or being a bear, and it's like, why can't we just let ourselves just shed those labels and just let people be? Because I just feel like we work so hard to try to fit into specific molds, and I understand that it comes from a place of wanting to find community and find people that we have something in common with, but I also feel like it doesn't give us the space we need to keep evolving and discovering new things about ourselves. And that's been the best part about coming out as non-binary, is that every day is an opportunity for me to discover something new about myself, or to try just to listen to somebody else's story and somebody else's experience and look at my life through that lens and see how my life and how my identity lines up with that, and see if something helps me realize something new about myself. And it's an exciting experience, and it's an exciting way to be. And I just think about how I was in high school and how sad and lonely and depressed I was, and a lot of people who knew me in person might not have thought that, but I struggled with suicidal thinking through high school, and it's something that I've dealt with for a long time through my 20s, and now that's not even a thought anymore, because I see myself as somebody who is unlimited possibility and unlimited potential, because no one gets to tell me who I am, because I get to say who that is. Well, I think a large part of it comes from fear. I think people, when they're faced with something that they don't understand and that they don't know and they don't know how to approach, because they don't understand it, their automatic reaction is to put walls up or to go into attack mode, because their defense mechanisms turn on. And I've said before in something I wrote where I'm not made for everyone and everyone's not made for me either. And it's not my responsibility to make other people comfortable with who I am and how I get to be in the world. And all I can do for myself to protect myself is figure out how to engage with that person and figure out, is a conversation even worth having? And because not everyone's prepared to listen. And when people aren't prepared to listen, progress can't happen. And I think that's one of the issues that we have with our social climate nowadays, is that we live in a culture where everybody loves to talk, but no one loves to listen. And listening is a hard skill for a lot of people. And people speak all sorts of languages, and I don't get it right all the time. This is a funny, terrifying story. I had a really bad day once, and this was last year, I think it was, and I was walking home from the train, and somebody drunkenly called me faggot walking through the street, and I had it. And I punched him in the face, and because I was just like, no one's getting away with this right now. And I just left him on the sidewalk to deal with himself and kept going home. And there's a part of me that regrets it, but there's also the part of me like, I stood up for myself. And that can be a difficult thing to do in those situations. And A lot of people don't understand that words are also violent, and that I come from New York, and somebody says something. I come from an experience where sometimes it's okay to hit back, but I'm not trying to encourage that. Please don't take that as permission to just run around and punch people in the face because you don't like them. But the funny thing is that a couple weeks later, I see this person on the street, and he apologizes to me. And sometimes violence is the language that people speak. And in that moment, he understood I behaved like an ass and got what was coming to me in that situation. And we set ourselves up to be in those kinds of situations where we decide to make the things that are different about other people something that makes you better than them, and something that you can exercise your power over that person. And that's what owning privilege looks like. Like for me, as a person who lives in a male body, and as a person who is even as a person of color, I'm light-skinned, and I have to own that I have different sets of privileges when it comes to engaging other people. And I have the privilege of passing as male. That gives me male privilege. So I have to be conscientious of when I'm using that privilege and how that's affecting the other people in the spaces that I'm sharing with others. And I think for those of us who are aware of that we can do a lot to change people's minds by just understanding how we can take ownership of the different pieces of who we are, and how that sort of fits into how we can help other people and hold other folks accountable. It's like, how do we hold the people who share the same sorts of privileges that we have accountable for others? Like, how do I hold people who are male presenting and light-skinned accountable for black women and for trans women of color, and people, and understanding that if I'm going to punch anyone, to punch up, and how we understand and use that to get everybody forward. So to find me on social media, you can find me with Call Me Jolie, and that is Joe with no E. And I'm also on Spotify and Apple Music and all the things if you want to hear the music that I'm coming out with. And you can find some of my smaller projects on SoundCloud if you look me up.